An 11-year-old boy in torn sneakers stood before a roomful of laughing scientists. "Boy, I'll give you 10 million if you solve this," the billionaire mocked. But when the chalk stopped moving, the laughter died, and the impossible became possible. Ethan Collins learned 3 things before he turned 11. That MIT's back doors opened if you knew which janitor to ask. That advanced mathematics textbooks from the library could teach you anything if you had enough time, and that brilliant people rarely believed brilliance could come from someone wearing shoes held together with duct tape. The 4th thing he learned, that humiliation in front of 300 people feels like drowning in ice water, came on a Tuesday afternoon in MIT's largest lecture hall. He shouldn't have been there. The sign outside said, "Private event, Blackwell Innovation Summit, invitation only." But Ethan had spent 2 years sneaking into MIT lectures while his mother cleaned the bathrooms, and he'd learned that if you walked with purpose and kept your head down, most people assumed you belonged. Today was different. Today, Marcus Blackwell himself was speaking. Ethan had read about Blackwell in Fortune magazine at the library. Tech billionaire, quantum computing pioneer, youngest person ever to take a company public at 30. The article had shown Blackwell standing in front of a glass tower in Silicon Valley, arms crossed, looking like someone who'd never heard the word no and wouldn't accept it if he did. The lecture hall was packed. Scientists, professors, graduate students, all of them in suits or blazers, all of them holding tablets and designer coffee cups. Ethan slid into a seat in the back row, trying to make himself invisible, which wasn't hard when you were 11 years old and dressed in clothes from the donation center. On stage, Blackwell paced like a predator. 6'2", expensive suit that probably cost more than Ethan's mother made in 3 months, silver at his temples, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Quantum encryption," Blackwell announced, his voice carrying through the hall with the confidence of someone used to being the smartest person in every room, "represents the final frontier of cybersecurity. Whoever cracks the encryption problem controls the future of digital privacy. Governments, corporations, individuals, everyone becomes vulnerable or invincible based on this single breakthrough." He clicked a remote. An equation appeared on the massive screen behind him. Lines and lines of mathematics so complex they looked like art. Greek letters, integrals, quantum mechanics notation. Ethan's breath caught. He recognized parts of it from his studies, but this was beyond anything he'd seen. "This," Blackwell continued, "is the Kaufman equation, named after Dr. Richard Kaufman, who spent 30 years trying to solve it before his death 2 years ago. It represents the key to quantum-resistant encryption. Solve this, and you revolutionize cybersecurity. Fail, and quantum computers will eventually break every password, every bank account, every secret in existence." The audience murmured, impressed. "I've assembled the brightest minds in quantum computing," Blackwell said, gesturing to a row of scientists in the front. "Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Cambridge. None of them have solved it. Dr. Kaufman himself died believing it was impossible." He paused for effect. "But I don't believe in impossible. So I'm offering $10 million to anyone who can solve the Kaufman equation. Right here, right now, today." The hall erupted. $10 million. Scientists leaning forward, cameras flashing. This wasn't just a lecture. This was a spectacle. Ethan stared at the equation, his mind already working. The Kaufman equation. He'd read about it in an advanced quantum mechanics book he'd found in MIT's library, tucked away in a corner where nobody looked. Dr. Kaufman's life work. The problem every mathematician said was unsolvable. But as Ethan studied it, something clicked. A pattern. The way the variables interacted reminded him of something he'd learned about Fourier transforms and wave functions. If you approached it, not as a pure mathematics problem but as a physics problem, if you treated the quantum states as wave collapse probabilities rather than discrete values. "Any takers?" Blackwell's voice dripped with amusement. "Surely someone wants to be $10 million richer?" A few graduate students stood up, approaching the board. Blackwell handed them markers. They worked for 10 minutes, filling the board with calculations. Wrong. All of them wrong. Blackwell pointed out the errors with barely concealed contempt. "Next," he called out. More attempts, more failures. The scientists in the front row whispered to each other, shaking their heads. If they couldn't solve it, nobody could. Ethan's hand went up before he could stop himself. Several people turned to look. Then more. Then the entire section. An 11-year-old kid in the back row, hand raised like this was a middle school quiz. Someone laughed. Then someone else. The laughter spread like a wave. Blackwell's eyes found Ethan, and for a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance that his carefully orchestrated event was being interrupted by a child. "Yes?" Blackwell said, his tone already dismissive. "Did you have a question?" "I'd like to try," Ethan said, his voice smaller than he wanted it to be. More laughter, louder now. A woman in the third row actually pointed. "You'd like to try," Blackwell repeated slowly, as if speaking to someone who didn't understand English. "The Kaufman equation, the problem that defeated the greatest minds in quantum computing." "You?" He gestured at Ethan, taking in the torn sneakers, the faded jeans, the jacket that was 2 sizes too big. "Think you can solve it?" Ethan stood up, his legs shaking. "Yes, sir." The laughter became deafening. Graduate students doubled over. Even some of the professors were smiling, shaking their heads at the absurdity. Blackwell walked down the aisle, stopping 10 feet from Ethan. Up close, he was even more imposing, tall, powerful, used to dominating every space he entered. "How old are you?" Blackwell asked. 11, Ethan said. 11, Blackwell repeated, and now he was playing to the crowd, his voice theatrical. "And what makes you think you're qualified to solve a problem that stumped Richard Kaufman for 30 years? Do you have a PhD in quantum mechanics I don't know about?" "No, sir," Ethan said quietly. "But I've been studying." "Studying?" Blackwell interrupted, his smile widening. "From where?" "YouTube videos." "Khan Academy?" The audience roared with laughter. "Let me guess. You watched a documentary on quantum physics, and now you think you're the next Einstein?" Ethan's face burned. He wanted to sit down, to disappear, to run, but his mother's voice echoed in his head. "Don't ever be ashamed of what you know, baby. Knowledge is the one thing nobody can take from you." "I've been teaching myself from MIT's library," Ethan said, forcing his voice steady. "Advanced quantum mechanics, linear algebra, the mathematics of wave function collapse." "The MIT library," Blackwell said, and his tone had shifted, sharper now, more dangerous. "Tell me something. Did you pay tuition to study at MIT? Or are you one of those kids who sneaks into places they don't belong?" The words hit like a physical blow. Ethan's throat closed. How did Blackwell know? "I thought so," Blackwell said, reading Ethan's expression. "Security mentioned we had a recurring trespasser, an 11-year-old who somehow kept getting past the doors." He turned to address the entire room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a trespasser. A child who thinks breaking into MIT gives him the right to interrupt serious scientific discourse." The mood shifted. The laughter was different now. Cruel, righteously angry. How dare this kid infiltrate their exclusive space? Who did he think he was? "Maybe," Blackwell continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "Instead of wasting everyone's time, you should focus on finishing elementary school before trying to solve problems designed for people with actual credentials." A professor in the front row nodded approvingly. "Here, here." Ethan felt tears threatening. "Don't cry. Don't cry in front of 300 people. Don't prove them right about you." "Tell you what," Blackwell said, and his smile was the cruelest thing Ethan had ever seen. "I'll make you a deal, because I'm a generous man who believes in encouraging youth, no matter how misguided." He paused for maximum effect. "Boy, I'll give you $10 million if you solve this." The room erupted. Applause. Laughter. This was entertainment now. The billionaire offering impossible money to a trespassing child. Marcus Blackwell, so confident in his superiority that he could mock an 11-year-old and turn it into a viral moment. "In fact," Blackwell added, pulling out his phone, "let me document this. Someone film this. I want the world to see what happens when delusion meets reality, when entitled children think they deserve what accomplished adults have earned." 3 people pulled out phones. A journalist in the corner raised her camera. This was going to be everywhere. The arrogant kid who thought he could solve the unsolvable, humiliated by a billionaire in front of the scientific elite. Ethan looked at the equation on the screen, looked at the 300 faces staring at him with amusement or contempt or pity. looked at Blackwell's triumphant smile, and thought about his mother, Claire Collins, who worked 3 jobs to keep them in a 1-bedroom apartment in Roxbury, who came home at 11 p.m. smelling like bleach and floor wax, her hands raw from cleaning MIT's bathrooms, who told Ethan every night that education was the ladder out of poverty, that his brilliance was real even when the world told him it wasn't. "Okay," Ethan said quietly. "Okay?" Blackwell laughed. "Okay what?" "I'll solve it," Ethan said louder now. "For $10 million. The laughter reached a crescendo. This was the best entertainment these scientists had seen in years. Blackwell gestured grandly toward the stage. "Please, be my guest. Show us what an 11-year-old trespasser can do with one of the most complex equations in modern mathematics." Ethan walked down the aisle. Each step felt like moving through concrete. The eyes on him were physical weights. By the time he reached the board, his hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the marker Blackwell handed him. "You have 20 minutes, Blackwell announced. "Because I'm generous. Though I suspect you'll realize your mistake in about 30 seconds when you actually read the equation up close." More laughter. Ethan stood before the board. The Kaufman equation sprawled across it in Blackwell's confident handwriting. Up close, it was even more intimidating. Layers of quantum mechanical operators, complex integrals, variables that seemed to have no relationship to each other. But there, right there, in the 3rd line, the wave function collapse operator. Blackwell had written it as a discrete state change. But what if... Ethan started writing. His hand moved faster as the fear melted away, replaced by the pure mathematics he'd fallen in love with 3 years ago when he'd found his first calculus book. The room noise faded. The cameras faded. Even Blackwell faded. There was only the equation, only the problem, only the solution forming under his marker. He wrote for 17 minutes, filling the board with calculations, showing how treating quantum states as probability waves rather than discrete particles changed everything, how Kaufman had approached it from the wrong direction, how the solution wasn't more complexity but elegant simplicity, a Fourier transform that collapsed the entire equation into something manageable. When Ethan set down the marker and stepped back, the silence was absolute. The solution stared back at him from the board, complete and perfect. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. He turned to face the audience. 300 people sat frozen, mouths open, eyes wide. The laughter was gone. The contempt was gone. In its place was something Ethan had never seen directed at him before. Shock. And in the front row, Dr. Thomas Bradley, one of MIT's most respected quantum physicists, stood up slowly, staring at the board like he'd seen a ghost. "My God," Dr. Bradley whispered. That's correct." Blackwell's face went pale. "What?" "The solution," Dr. Bradley said louder now, walking toward the stage. "It's correct. Not just correct. It's brilliant. He approached it as a wave mechanics problem rather than pure quantum states. Kaufman was looking at it wrong. We've all been looking at it wrong." He turned to stare at Ethan. "How old did you say you were?" 11, Ethan whispered. Dr. Bradley looked back at the board, then at Ethan, then at the board again. 11 years old, self-taught, and he just solved a problem that Richard Kaufman, one of the greatest minds of our generation, spent 30 years failing to crack. The room exploded. Scientists rushing forward. The journalist's camera flashing, people shouting questions, Dr. Bradley trying to maintain order. And in the center of it all, Marcus Blackwell stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and rage, staring at the 11-year-old boy who'd just made him look like a fool in front of everyone who mattered. Ethan met Blackwell's eyes and saw something that made his stomach drop. This wasn't over. This was just beginning, and the billionaire who'd promised $10 million looked like he'd rather die than pay it. The lecture hall had transformed into chaos in the 30 seconds since Ethan set down the marker. Scientists crowded the stage, pointing at the board, arguing with each other in voices that grew louder by the moment. Graduate students pulled out phones, photographing the solution from every angle. Someone shouted, "Impossible," while someone else yelled, "Check the third integral." The journalist, Amanda Chen from the Boston Globe, pushed through the crowd, her camera capturing everything. And in the center of it all, Ethan stood frozen, trying to process what he'd just done. Dr. Thomas Bradley reached the board first, his 62 years forgotten as he practically ran up the steps. His eyes scanned Ethan's work line by line, his finger tracing the calculations. Behind him, 3 other MIT professors fought their way forward, desperate to see if Bradley was right. The wave function approach, Bradley muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Treating quantum states as probability distributions rather than discrete values. It's so obvious now. Why didn't we? He turned to stare at Ethan. Where did you learn this? Ethan's mouth was dry. Books. From the library. I've been reading about quantum mechanics for 2 years. 2 years, Bradley repeated, his voice filled with something like wonder. You're 11 years old, and you've been teaching yourself graduate-level quantum physics for 2 years. Stop! Marcus Blackwell's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The room fell silent. He stood at the base of the stage, his face no longer pale but flushed with rage, barely contained. His hands were clenched into fists. When he spoke, each word was precise and cold. Nobody touch that board, nobody photograph it, and somebody get me Dr. Rodriguez. Now. A murmur went through the crowd. Dr. Sofia Rodriguez was one of the world's leading experts in quantum cryptography. If anyone could verify or disprove the solution, it was her. Blackwell climbed the stage steps slowly, his eyes fixed on Ethan. Up close, his expression was terrifying. Not anger exactly, but something worse. Calculation. The look of someone deciding how to eliminate a problem. You, Blackwell said quietly, so only Ethan could hear, have no idea what you've just done. Before Ethan could respond, a woman's voice called out from the back. Mr. Blackwell, is it true? Did the boy solve it? Amanda Chen, the journalist, had her phone up recording. The moment was being live-streamed to God knew how many people. Blackwell's face transformed instantly, the rage disappearing behind a mask of amused skepticism. When he turned to face the crowd, he was smiling. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Blackwell said, his voice carrying that same condescending tone he'd used on Ethan earlier. What we have here is a child who's written some mathematics on a board. Whether it's correct, whether it actually solves the Kaufman equation that requires serious verification by qualified experts. Dr. Bradley said it was correct, someone called out. Dr. Bradley, Blackwell said smoothly, made a preliminary observation in the heat of the moment. I'm sure he'd agree that a problem which defeated Richard Kaufman for 30 years deserves more than 30 seconds of review before we declare it solved. Bradley opened his mouth to argue, but Blackwell cut him off. Which is why I've called for Dr. Rodriguez. She literally wrote the textbook on quantum cryptography. If anyone can verify this, he gestured dismissively at the board. It's her. The crowd murmured approval. Blackwell was right. They needed proper verification. This was too important to rush. Ethan felt sick. The way Blackwell said this when referring to Ethan's solution, like it was garbage that needed disposing of. The confidence in his voice. He wasn't worried. He was planning something. In the meantime, Blackwell continued, addressing the entire room, let's discuss what we know about our young mathematician. The pause before mathematician was deliberate, loaded with doubt. He claims to have taught himself quantum mechanics from library books at age 11, while apparently trespassing into MIT facilities for, how long was it, son? 2 years, Ethan whispered. 2 years, Blackwell repeated, and the way he said it made it sound like a confession of criminal behavior rather than dedication to learning. 2 years of unauthorized access to private property. I wonder, he turned to face Amanda Chen's camera directly. In those 2 years, did you perhaps gain access to research that wasn't meant for public consumption? Notes from professors? Preliminary work on quantum problems? The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Ethan's stomach dropped. No, I never. Because, Blackwell continued, it would be quite easy, wouldn't it, for a child with access to MIT's facilities to, say, copy someone else's work? To perhaps find Dr. Kaufman's old research notes, notes that might have contained hints toward the solution, and simply transcribe them. The room exploded, scientists shouting, some defending Ethan, some nodding at Blackwell's logic. Of course, that made more sense than an 11-year-old solving the unsolvable. The kid must have cheated somehow. That's not true, Ethan's voice broke. I didn't copy anything. I solved it myself. Then you won't mind, Blackwell said, his smile sharpening, waiting for Dr. Rodriguez to verify not just whether the solution is correct, but whether it contains any elements of Dr. Kaufman's proprietary research. Research that, I should mention, my company Blackwell Quantum Systems acquired after his death. There it was. Blackwell owned Kaufman's research, which meant if Ethan's solution bore any resemblance to it, Blackwell could claim theft of intellectual property. This is insane, Dr. Bradley said, stepping forward. Marcus, you know as well as I do that the boy's approach is completely different from anything Kaufman tried. Look at the wave function treatment. Kaufman never even considered. What I know, Blackwell interrupted, his voice hardening, is that I offered $10 million for a solution to a problem that has stumped the brightest minds in quantum computing. And what I'm not going to do is hand over that money to a child trespasser based on 30 seconds of observation by one professor, no matter how respected. He turned back to Ethan, and his voice dropped to a whisper that only the front rows could hear. You want your $10 million, boy? Then you're going to prove, beyond any shadow of doubt, that you earned it. Otherwise, you're going to leave here the same way you came in, with nothing. The doors at the back of the hall opened, and Dr. Sofia Rodriguez entered. 40 years old, professor at Harvard, recipient of the Fields Medal for her work in quantum theory. If she said the solution was correct, nobody could dispute it. She walked down the aisle with calm authority, acknowledging colleagues with nods, but saying nothing. When she reached the stage and saw Ethan, her expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or confusion about why a child was standing at the board. Dr. Rodriguez, Blackwell said warmly, thank you for coming on such short notice. We have a situation that requires your expertise. So I heard, Rodriguez said, her accent revealing her Puerto Rican heritage. You're claiming someone solved the Kaufman equation? This young man, Blackwell said, and the way he emphasized young made it sound like an insult, has presented what he claims is a solution. Dr. Bradley believes it's correct. I'm skeptical. Rodriguez looked at Ethan, then at the board, then back at Ethan. You wrote this? Yes, ma'am, Ethan said. How old are you? 11. Something shifted in Rodriguez's expression. Not disbelief, but intense curiosity. She turned to the board and began reading. The hall fell silent. 300 people watching one woman study mathematics. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat, could feel Blackwell's eyes on him, waiting for Rodriguez to declare the solution invalid. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15. Rodriguez pulled out a tablet, began running calculations, cross-referencing, testing variables. Her fingers flew across the screen. At one point she asked for chalk, wrote her own equations alongside Ethan's, checked the integration constants. 20 minutes became 30. Ethan's legs were shaking. He wanted to sit down but didn't dare move. Beside him, Dr. Bradley watched Rodriguez with the intensity of someone witnessing history. Even Blackwell had gone quiet, though his jaw was clenched so tight the muscles jumped. Finally, after 37 minutes that felt like hours, Dr. Rodriguez set down her chalk and turned to face the room. The solution, she said, her voice carrying clearly in the absolute silence, is correct. The hall erupted. Applause. Shouting. Scientists on their feet. Amanda Chen's camera capturing every moment. Furthermore, Rodriguez continued, and her voice somehow cut through the noise. It's brilliant. Revolutionary. The wave mechanics approach. Treating quantum encryption as a probability field rather than discrete states opens up applications we haven't even begun to explore. This isn't just a solution to the Kaufman equation. It's a fundamental rethinking of how we approach quantum cryptography. She turned to look at Ethan, and there were tears in her eyes. Who taught you this? She asked. Nobody, Ethan said. I taught myself, from books. What books? Principles of Quantum Mechanics by Shankar. Quantum Computation and Quantum Information by Nielsen and Chuang. Dr. Kaufman's published papers on quantum field theory. He paused. And a lot of YouTube videos when I didn't understand the math. A laugh rippled through the crowd. Warm now, amazed rather than mocking. Rodriguez shook her head slowly. I've been studying quantum mechanics for 25 years. I have a PhD from Princeton and a Fields Medal. and an 11-year-old who taught himself from library books just solved a problem I couldn't crack. She walked over to Ethan and did something that shocked everyone. She knelt down, putting herself at his eye level, and extended her hand. "It's an honor," she said softly, "to meet you." Ethan shook her hand, too overwhelmed to speak. The room exploded again, scientists rushing forward, everyone wanting to talk to the boy genius. Dr. Bradley beaming with pride like a grandfather. Amanda Chen fighting through the crowd, calling out questions. And Marcus Blackwell stood alone on the stage, watching his carefully constructed event collapse around him. "Mr. Blackwell," Amanda Chen's voice cut through the noise. "The solution is verified. When will you present the $10 million prize?" Every eye turned to Blackwell. Every camera pointed at him. This moment was being live-streamed, shared, already going viral. The billionaire who'd mocked a child genius. The arrogant CEO about to be humiliated. Blackwell's smile was thin and dangerous. The verification process isn't complete. "Dr. Rodriguez just confirmed—" "Dr. Rodriguez," Blackwell interrupted, "confirmed that the mathematics are sound. What she hasn't confirmed, what we still need to investigate, is whether this solution infringes on proprietary research owned by Blackwell Quantum Systems. Research that my company acquired from Dr. Kaufman's estate." The room went quiet again. "You're saying," Dr. Bradley said slowly, "that even though the boy solved your challenge, you're not going to pay him?" "I'm saying," Blackwell replied, his voice cold, "that I'm not going to pay $10 million for stolen intellectual property. If, and it's a significant if, we determine that this solution is original work and not derived from Dr. Kaufman's private research, then we can discuss payment." "That's garbage," someone shouted. "That's the law," Blackwell countered. "My company owns the rights to Dr. Kaufman's quantum encryption research. If this solution," he gestured at the board, "bears any resemblance to that research, it belongs to me, not to a child trespasser." Amanda Chen was writing furiously. This was going to be front-page news. The billionaire refusing to pay a child genius on a technicality. Ethan felt the world tilting. He'd done it. He'd solved the impossible equation, been verified by one of the greatest minds in quantum physics, and Blackwell was still going to take it away from him. "How long?" Dr. Rodriguez asked, her voice tight with anger. "Will this investigation take?" "As long as necessary," Blackwell said. "My legal team will need to review Dr. Kaufman's research, compare it to this solution, consult with intellectual property experts. Could be days, could be weeks." He smiled. "Could be months." "You gave your word," Dr. Bradley said, "in front of 300 witnesses. And I'll keep it," Blackwell replied smoothly, "once we establish that the solution is legitimate and original. Until then," he turned to Ethan, "I suggest you go home, boy, back to wherever you came from. And maybe next time think twice before trying to compete with people who actually earned their place at the table." He walked off the stage, leaving Ethan standing there with tears running down his face, holding a solution that had just been called brilliant by a Fields Medal winner, but was apparently worthless because a billionaire said so. Amanda Chen lowered her camera and approached Ethan carefully. "Hey," she said softly. "What's your name?" "Ethan," he whispered. "Ethan Collins." "Ethan," Amanda repeated, typing into her phone. "And where do you live?" "Roxbury," Ethan said. "With my mom." "Your mom?" Amanda smiled gently. "What's her name?" "Claire. Claire Collins." Ethan wiped his eyes. "She cleans bathrooms here, at MIT. That's how I got in. I'd wait for her to finish work and—" His voice broke. Amanda put her hand on his shoulder. "Listen to me very carefully, Ethan. What just happened? The whole world is watching. By tomorrow morning, everyone is going to know your name. Everyone is going to know what you did. And everyone is going to know that Marcus Blackwell tried to cheat you out of what you earned." She looked at her phone, where the live stream had racked up 20,000 viewers and climbing. "This isn't over," Amanda said. "This is just beginning. And something tells me that Mr. Blackwell just made the biggest mistake of his life." On the stage, Dr. Rodriguez was photographing Ethan's solution from every angle. Dr. Bradley was on his phone, already calling colleagues. And somewhere in the building, Claire Collins was finishing her shift, completely unaware that her 11-year-old son had just changed both their lives forever, whether Marcus Blackwell liked it or not. Claire Collins was scrubbing the third-floor bathroom of MIT's mathematics building when her phone buzzed for the 47th time in 10 minutes. She ignored it. Her supervisor had made it clear, phones away during work hours. Claire couldn't afford to lose this job. Not when it paid $14 an hour and came with the health insurance that covered Ethan's asthma medication. But the buzzing didn't stop. Text after text. Call after call. Finally, during her break, Claire pulled out her phone with hands still raw from bleach. 63 missed calls, over 100 text messages, and her voicemail was full. The first text was from her sister. "Claire, call me now." The second from her neighbor, Mrs. Chen. "Your son is on the news." The third from someone she didn't recognize. "Is Ethan okay? We're all praying for him." Claire's heart stopped. Ethan. Something happened to Ethan. She called her sister with shaking hands. Lisa answered on the first ring. "Oh, thank God," Lisa said. "Have you not seen it? It's everywhere. It's Claire. Your son is famous." "Oh, what are you talking about? Is Ethan hurt?" "Hurt? No, he's—" "Claire, turn on your phone. Look at Twitter. Look at anything. Your 11-year-old just solved some impossible math problem in front of MIT scientists, and a billionaire is refusing to pay him $10 million, and the whole internet is losing their minds." Claire's phone buzzed again. A news alert. "Boy genius solves Kaufman equation. Billionaire CEO refuses to pay 10 Mentis prize." Then another. 11-year-old math prodigy humiliated by Marcus Blackwell at MIT event. And another. "Watch, child solves impossible equation. Tech CEO claims cheating." Claire opened Twitter. The top trending topic was, "Da can't pay Ethan." The second was, "Blackwell fraud." She clicked the first video, and there was her son, her baby. Standing in front of a massive chalkboard covered in mathematics, she couldn't begin to understand, facing a room full of adults who were laughing at him. A tall man in an expensive suit, Marcus Blackwell, the caption said, towering over Ethan, his voice dripping with contempt. "Boy, I'll give you $10 million if you solve this." Claire watched with her hand over her mouth as Ethan walked to the board. As he wrote for 17 minutes, while 300 people watched. As he stepped back, and the room fell silent. Then a woman's voice. "My God, that's correct. Not just correct, it's brilliant." The video cut to Blackwell's face going pale. Cut to scientists rushing forward. Cut to a woman with graying hair kneeling in front of Ethan, shaking his hand. Cut to Blackwell saying, "The verification process isn't complete," while Ethan stood there with tears running down his face. The video had 2.3 million views. It had been posted 45 minutes ago. Claire's phone rang. Amanda Chen, according to the caller ID. "Mrs. Collins?" A woman's voice, professional but kind. "My name is Amanda Chen. I'm a journalist with the Boston Globe. I was at MIT today when your son solved the Kaufman equation." "Where is he?" Claire demanded. "Where's Ethan?" "He's safe. He's still at MIT with several professors who are looking after him. But Mrs. Collins, there's going to be a lot of media attention. I'd like to meet with you and Ethan. Tell your story properly before—" "I'm coming to get him," Claire said. "Right now." She didn't ask permission to leave work early, just grabbed her coat and ran. By the time Claire reached MIT's mathematics building, there were news vans outside, reporters with cameras, a crowd of people holding signs, "Pay Ethan" and "Blackwell cert fraud" and "Genius has no age limit." Claire pushed through them, ignoring the shouted questions, and found Ethan in a conference room surrounded by professors. He looked so small in that leather chair, his feet not quite touching the ground, his face exhausted and scared, and trying so hard to be brave. "Mom," he whispered when he saw her. Claire crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled him into her arms. Ethan buried his face in her shoulder and started crying, really crying the way he hadn't since his father left 5 years ago. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I know I wasn't supposed to sneak into lectures. I know you told me to stay in the library while you worked, but I just wanted to learn and—" "Shh," Claire said, holding him tight. "You're not in trouble. You didn't do anything wrong. Mr. Blackwell said I cheated. He said I stole the answer. He said—" Ethan couldn't finish. "Mr. Blackwell," said a voice from across the room, "is a liar." "Doctor." Thomas Bradley stood up from his chair, his expression harder than Claire had ever seen on an academic. "Mrs. Collins," Bradley said. "My name is Dr. Thomas Bradley. I've been teaching at MIT for 34 years, and I want you to know that what your son did today was extraordinary. He solved a problem that the greatest minds in quantum computing have been working on for decades, and he did it through pure brilliance, self-education, and determination. Then why, Claire's voice shook, why did Mr. Blackwell say he cheated? Because, said another voice. Dr. Sophia Rodriguez stepped forward. Marcus Blackwell is desperate. His company, Blackwell Quantum Systems, has been promising investors a breakthrough in quantum encryption for 3 years. They've burned through $2 billion in funding. Their stock price has dropped 40% in the last year. And 6 months ago, Blackwell made a public promise that they'd solve the Kaufman equation by year-end. She pulled out her tablet, showed Claire a news article. Blackwell Quantum Systems promises revolutionary encryption solution. Stock soars. That was 8 months ago, Rodriguez continued. Since then? Nothing. His team of PhDs couldn't crack it. He spent millions acquiring Dr. Kaufman's research, hoping there'd be a solution hidden in those papers. There wasn't. Blackwell was facing the biggest failure of his career. Then Ethan solved it, Bradley said quietly. In 17 minutes. A self-taught 11-year-old did what Blackwell's company couldn't do with unlimited resources. So he's trying to steal it, Claire said, understanding flooding through her. He's claiming Ethan cheated so he can take the solution and say his company discovered it. Exactly, Rodriguez confirmed. And if he can discredit Ethan, call him a trespasser, accuse him of stealing research, nobody will question when Blackwell Quantum Systems suddenly announces they've independently solved the equation. Claire felt rage building in her chest. Her son, her brilliant, kind, innocent son, was being used as a pawn by a billionaire who couldn't stand being outsmarted by a child. What can we do? Claire asked. Bradley and Rodriguez exchanged glances. We fight, Bradley said simply. We make sure everyone knows the truth. We document that Ethan's solution is completely original, uses approaches that no one in Blackwell's company ever considered, and represents genuine breakthrough thinking. He smiled grimly. And we make Marcus Blackwell regret the day he tried to cheat a child out of what he earned. Amanda Chen appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Collins, if you're willing, I'd like to interview you and Ethan. I want to tell your story. Where you live, what you do, how Ethan taught himself quantum mechanics. Give people the full picture. Claire looked at Ethan. Baby, do you want to do this? Ethan wiped his eyes. Will it help? Will it make Mr. Blackwell pay what he promised? I can't promise that, Amanda said honestly, but I can promise that the world will know the truth. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Ethan nodded. Okay. The interview took 2 hours. Amanda asked about their 1-bedroom apartment in Roxbury, about Claire working 3 jobs before consolidating to 2, about Ethan's father leaving when the medical bills got too high, about Ethan discovering mathematics at age 7, teaching himself algebra from library books, progressing to calculus by 9, quantum mechanics by 10. Why quantum mechanics? Amanda asked Ethan gently. Because it's beautiful, Ethan said simply. The way particles can be in 2 places at once until you observe them. The way reality changes based on measurement. It's like the universe is telling us that things aren't fixed, that everything is possibility until we choose to look. Amanda typed rapidly. This quote alone would be shared 1 million times. And why did you sneak into MIT? Amanda asked. Ethan looked at his mother. Because Mom works so hard. She's always tired, always worried about money. And I thought if I could learn enough, get smart enough, maybe I could get a scholarship. Go to MIT for real someday. Get a job that pays enough that Mom doesn't have to clean bathrooms anymore. Claire's eyes filled with tears. She hadn't known. Hadn't realized that every time she came home exhausted, Ethan was watching, planning, trying to find a way to save her. Mr. Blackwell called you a trespasser, Amanda said. How did that make you feel? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Like I didn't deserve to learn. Like because we're poor, I'm not allowed to be smart. Like the only people who get to solve big problems are people who can afford to belong in places like MIT. He looked directly at Amanda's camera. But that's not true, Ethan continued, his voice stronger now. Being smart isn't about money. It's about curiosity and work and refusing to give up when something's hard. I didn't need fancy equipment or expensive tutors. I just needed books and time and... His voice cracked. A mom who believed I could do it. The video of that interview would be viewed 40 million times in the next 72 hours. By that evening, the internet had erupted. Pay Ethan was trending worldwide. Petition websites crashed from traffic. Over 2 million people signed a petition demanding Blackwell honor his promise. Twitter users dug into Blackwell Quantum Systems history, finding patent applications that looked suspiciously like Dr. Kaufman's old research, SEC filings showing the company was hemorrhaging money, and interviews where Blackwell had promised breakthroughs that never materialized. A rival tech CEO tweeted, "I'll pay Ethan the $10 million myself if Blackwell won't. Genius deserves to be rewarded, not exploited." Harvard's president released a statement. Harvard would be honored to offer Ethan Collins a full scholarship when he's ready for university. Dr. Richard Kaufman's daughter, a computer science professor herself, posted a video. "My father spent his life believing the equation was unsolvable. Ethan proved him wrong in 17 minutes. Dad would have been thrilled, and he would have been disgusted by Marcus Blackwell trying to steal this boy's achievement." But the most powerful moment came at 11 p.m. that night, when someone found and posted a video from 2 years earlier. Marcus Blackwell giving a TED talk about innovation. "The problem with modern education," Blackwell said on stage, confident and charming, "is that we've made knowledge exclusive. We've created barriers, tuition, credentials, institutional access, that prevent brilliant minds from reaching their potential. True innovation comes from people who think differently, who aren't constrained by traditional education, who dare to challenge the status quo." The video cut to present-day Blackwell, sneering at Ethan, another kid from the wrong side of town who thinks he deserves what people with credentials have earned. The hypocrisy was devastating. The video went viral instantly, 10 million views in 3 hours. At midnight, Blackwell Quantum Systems' stock price had dropped another 15%. Their board of directors called an emergency meeting. 3 major investors publicly withdrew support. And in a one-bedroom apartment in Roxbury, Claire Collins lay in bed with her son, watching the world rally around them, and allowed herself to believe, for the first time in a very long time, that maybe, just maybe, doing the right thing actually mattered. "Mom," Ethan said quietly in the darkness. "Yeah, baby. I was scared today, when everyone was laughing. When Mr. Blackwell said I cheated. I almost didn't write the solution. Almost just went home. What made you do it anyway?" Ethan was silent for a moment. "You. I kept thinking about how you never give up. How you work so hard even when you're tired. How you tell me that knowledge is power and nobody can take it from me." He paused. "I wanted to make you proud." Claire pulled him closer, tears streaming down her face. "Baby, I've been proud of you since the day you were born. But today you showed the whole world what I've always known. That you're extraordinary, that you're brave, that you're exactly who you're supposed to be." Outside their window, Boston glittered with lights. Somewhere in that city, Marcus Blackwell was realizing that humiliating a child on camera might have been the worst business decision of his career. But in apartment 3B in Roxbury, an 11-year-old boy who just revolutionized quantum cryptography fell asleep in his mother's arms, dreaming not of money or fame or revenge, but of the MIT library where it all began. And of all the other kids like him, poor, brilliant, desperate to learn, who might see his story and believe that they too could change the world, whether anyone gave them permission or not. The email arrived at 6 a.m. 3 days after Ethan's video went viral. Marcus Blackwell's attorneys were suing Ethan Collins for intellectual property theft, defamation, and breach of confidentiality. They were demanding the solution be turned over to Blackwell Quantum Systems immediately and seeking damages of $50 million. $50 million from an 11-year-old who lived in a one-bedroom apartment. Amanda Chen broke the story within an hour. The backlash was immediate and nuclear. Billionaire sues child genius for $50 after refusing to pay promised prize. The headline alone made people furious, but the lawsuit's actual contents were worse. Blackwell's legal team claimed that Ethan had accessed proprietary research materials during his 2 years at MIT, that his solution was derivative of Dr. Kaufman's classified work, and that by speaking to the media, Ethan had violated non-disclosure agreements he'd never signed. It was absurd, transparent, desperate, and it was working. "We can't afford a lawyer," Claire told Dr. Bradley over the phone, her voice shaking. "We can barely afford rent. How are we supposed to fight a billionaire's legal team? You're not going to, Bradley said, because you're not alone. By noon, 17 law firms had offered to represent Ethan pro bono. 3 patent attorneys from Stanford submitted affidavits proving Ethan's approach was entirely novel. MIT's legal department released a statement confirming that Dr. Kaufman's research, which Blackwell now owned, contained nothing remotely similar to Ethan's wave mechanics solution. Dr. Kaufman's daughter went further. She held a press conference outside Blackwell Quantum Systems headquarters. "My father's research is being used as a weapon against a child," Margaret Kaufman said, her voice hard with anger. "Marcus Blackwell bought my father's papers 2 years ago, promising to honor his legacy. Instead, he's hiding behind them to steal from an 11-year-old boy. My father would be ashamed." She held up a folder. "These are my father's personal notes, which I kept before selling his research to Blackwell. I've given them to independent experts. They confirm that Ethan's solution uses completely different mathematical frameworks. Blackwell knows this. He's lying to the courts and to the public." The press conference had 8 million views by evening, but Blackwell wasn't backing down. He appeared on CNBC that afternoon, composed and confident despite his company's stock continuing to plummet. "This isn't about money," Blackwell said smoothly. "It's about protecting intellectual property rights. My company invested billions developing quantum encryption technology. We can't allow that investment to be undermined by," he paused carefully, "enthusiastic amateurs, however well-intentioned." "The boy is 11, the interviewer said. "You promised him $10 million. "I promised $10 million for an original solution," Blackwell corrected. "What I cannot do in good conscience is reward what appears to be unauthorized use of proprietary research. If young Mr. Collins can prove his work is entirely original, which our experts strongly doubt, then we can discuss compensation." "Your experts," the interviewer pressed, "or independent verification?" Blackwell smiled. "My company employs the world's leading quantum physicists. I trust their judgment." What Blackwell didn't mention, 4 of those leading physicists had quit that morning, releasing a joint statement that Ethan's solution was revolutionary and completely original. 2 more had been fired for refusing to sign documents claiming otherwise. The story spiraled. Every day brought new revelations. A former Blackwell quantum systems engineer leaked internal emails showing executives discussing how to neutralize the Collins problem and acquire his methodology through legal pressure. The SEC announced an investigation into whether Blackwell had misled investors about his company's capabilities. Patent attorneys discovered that Blackwell Quantum Systems had filed applications based on Dr. Kaufman's research that was supposed to remain privately held per the purchase agreement. Margaret Kaufman filed her own lawsuit for breach of contract. And through it all, Ethan went to school. His 6th-grade teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had spent the first day fielding questions from students who'd seen their classmate on television. By the second day, she'd given up on the lesson plan and let Ethan explain quantum mechanics to his peers. "It's like Schrodinger's cat," Ethan said, drawing on the whiteboard. "The cat is both alive and dead until you open the box. Not because of magic, but because observation collapses probability waves into definite states. Reality is fluid until we measure it." A boy named Marcus, no relation to Blackwell, raised his hand. "So you're saying nothing is real until we look at it?" "I'm saying," Ethan replied carefully, "that real is more complicated than we think. Particles exist in multiple states simultaneously. They're here and there, spinning up and spinning down, until observation forces them to choose. It's not philosophy. It's measurable, repeatable physics." The class was silent, processing. "That's how you beat the equation?" a girl asked. "By thinking about reality differently? By treating the problem as waves instead of particles," Ethan said. Everyone was looking for discrete solutions, specific numbers, fixed states. But quantum encryption is fundamentally about probability. Once I stopped looking for one answer and started looking for probability fields, the solution became clear. Mrs. Patterson had tears in her eyes. This boy, who'd spent 2 years teaching himself in secret, was now teaching quantum physics to 11-year-olds in a Roxbury public school. And they were understanding. After class, Mrs. Patterson pulled Ethan aside. "The principal wants to talk to you. About the attention. Some parents are concerned about media disruption." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Am I in trouble?" No, baby, Mrs. Patterson said quickly. But you need to be prepared. Some people don't like it when others succeed, especially when those others are supposed to stay in their place. The meeting with Principal Davis was worse than Ethan expected. The school board received complaints, Davis said, not unkindly. Parents worried about their children's safety with news crews outside. Concerns about you being a distraction from learning. Suggestions that perhaps you'd be better served by, he cleared his throat, alternative educational arrangements. They want to kick me out, Ethan said flatly. They want to protect the school's environment, Davis corrected. But Ethan, between us, they're scared. Scared of attention, of controversy, of having a student who's smarter than some of their teachers. It makes people uncomfortable. I just want to learn, Ethan said, his voice small. Davis leaned forward. I know, and I'm fighting for you. But you need to understand, this lawsuit, this media attention, it's not going away. You're not just a student anymore. You're a symbol, and symbols make people nervous. That evening, Claire found Ethan staring at his math textbooks, not reading them. Baby, what's wrong? They want me to leave school, Ethan said. Because I'm a distraction. Because parents are concerned. Claire felt rage and heartbreak warring in her chest. We'll fight it. Mom, Ethan interrupted. What if they're right? What if I don't belong there anymore? I solved one equation and now everything's different. The other kids look at me weird. Teachers don't know how to talk to me. I'm not normal. Normal, Claire said fiercely, kneeling in front of him, is overrated. You know what you are? You're brilliant. You're brave. You're a kid who saw an impossible problem and refused to believe it was impossible. Don't you dare let anyone, make you feel like that's something to apologize for. But the lawsuit. Is Blackwell being desperate? Claire finished. And desperation makes people dangerous, but it also makes them sloppy. She showed Ethan her phone. A new article from Amanda Chen. Blackwell Quantum Systems under criminal investigation for patent fraud. They found it, Claire said. Proof that Blackwell filed patents based on Dr. Kaufman's research without proper authorization. Patents his company claimed were original innovations. That's fraud, baby. Federal fraud. The kind that comes with jail time. Ethan read the article, hope and fear mixing in his chest. Does this mean he has to pay me? This means, Claire said, he's going to have much bigger problems than you. She was right. The federal investigation moved fast. FBI agents raided Blackwell Quantum Systems offices, seizing computers and documents. The company's board of directors held an emergency meeting. And late that night, Marcus Blackwell's carefully constructed empire began to collapse. First, the board voted to remove him as CEO, effective immediately. Then, 3 major government contracts worth $2 billion were suspended pending investigation. Then, 6 more senior executives resigned. And finally, at 11 p.m., Blackwell Quantum Systems released a statement. After thorough internal review, we acknowledge that Ethan Collins's solution to the Kaufman equation is original, innovative, and represents a genuine breakthrough in quantum cryptography. We apologize for any confusion regarding intellectual property claims and confirm that Mr. Collins is entitled to the full $10 million prize as originally promised. The statement continued. Marcus Blackwell's actions do not reflect the values of this company. We are committed to transparency, innovation, and supporting young talent regardless of background. Claire read it 3 times before believing it was real. We won, she whispered. Baby, we won. But Ethan wasn't celebrating. He was staring at a different article, this one from an hour ago. Marcus Blackwell, photographed leaving his mansion, surrounded by reporters. His face no longer confident, but haggard, desperate, cornered. He's not going to stop, Ethan said quietly. Not really. Even if they pay me, even if he gets fired, people like him don't just accept being beaten by kids like me. Claire pulled him close. Then we stay vigilant, we stay smart, and we remember that you didn't do anything wrong. You solved a problem, that's all. The rest, the lawsuits, the media, the investigation, that's on him. But Mom, Ethan said, what if this is just the beginning? What if every time I try to do something, try to learn something, people are going to... Then we fight every time, Claire interrupted. And we win every time. Because you have something Marcus Blackwell doesn't have and never will have. What? Truth, Claire said simply. You solved that equation fairly. You earned that money honestly. You changed quantum cryptography through pure brilliance. And no lawsuit, no billionaire, no amount of money or power can change those facts. She looked at her son, her baby, who'd grown up too fast, who'd faced things no 11-year-old should face, and saw something that made her heart ache with pride. He wasn't broken. He wasn't scared into silence. He was angry, yes. Hurt, definitely. But underneath it all, he was still the boy who'd snuck into MIT lectures because learning mattered more than permission, who'd taught himself quantum mechanics because the universe was beautiful, who'd stood in front of 300 laughing adults and solved the unsolvable because his mother had taught him that knowledge was power, and nobody could take it from you. We're going to be okay, Claire said. Both of us. I promise. And in a mansion across town, Marcus Blackwell stared at his phone, watching his reputation burn in real time, and realized that the worst decision of his life hadn't been refusing to pay a child genius. It had been underestimating what happens when you try to steal dreams from someone who has nothing left to lose. 3 months after Marcus Blackwell's empire collapsed, Ethan Collins stood on the stage of MIT's largest auditorium, not as a trespasser this time, but as an invited guest. The check had arrived 6 weeks earlier, $10 million delivered by Blackwell Quantum Systems' new CEO with a formal apology. Claire had cried for an hour, holding the piece of paper that represented more money than their family would have earned in 10 lifetimes. But the money, Ethan had discovered, was the least important part of what he'd won. The auditorium was packed. Students, professors, journalists, and in the front row, wearing a dress she'd bought instead of borrowed for the first time in years, sat Claire Collins, her eyes already wet with proud tears. Dr. Thomas Bradley walked to the podium. 3 months ago, an 11-year-old boy solved a problem that had stumped the greatest minds in quantum computing.
Today, that same boy, now 12, is here to talk about what happens when brilliance meets opportunity. Ethan approached the microphone, his hands steadier than they'd been that first day. The room erupted in applause. These weren't people laughing at him anymore. They were celebrating him. My name is Ethan Collins, he began, and I almost didn't solve the Kaufman equation. The audience quieted, leaning forward. Not because I couldn't, Ethan continued, but because I was scared. Scared of being laughed at, scared of being told I didn't belong, scared that people would look at my torn shoes and donated clothes and decide I wasn't worth listening to. He paused, looking at the faces watching him. Mr. Blackwell was right about one thing. I was a trespasser. I snuck into MIT for 2 years because nobody gave me permission to learn here. Nobody said a poor kid from Roxbury could sit in lectures designed for graduate students, so I took that permission myself. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. But here's what I learned, Ethan said, his voice growing stronger. Permission is something other people control. Knowledge is something you take. Nobody can stop you from learning if you refuse to stop yourself. Dr. Sofia Rodriguez stood up in the third row. Tell them what you're doing with the money, Ethan. Ethan smiled. We paid off my mom's debts, bought her a car so she doesn't have to take 3 buses to work anymore, and we're using $5 million to start the Collins Foundation for Young Mathematicians. The applause started, but Ethan held up his hand. It's not a scholarship program, he explained. It's something different. We're opening math centers in Boston neighborhoods like Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, places where kids like me don't usually get chances. Free tutoring, computers, books, and most importantly, mentors who believe that brilliance exists everywhere, not just in expensive zip codes. The applause was thunderous now. Claire was openly crying. We've already opened 3 centers, Ethan continued, and we have 75 kids enrolled. Kids who are teaching themselves calculus from library books. Kids who are brilliant but invisible because nobody's looking. Kids who needed someone to tell them that trespassing into knowledge is the most honorable thing you can do. A student in the back shouted, "What about MIT? Are you coming here?" Ethan grinned. Dr. Bradley offered me early admission, but I'm 12. I'm staying in public school for now, learning with kids my age, being normal when I can be. MIT will still be here when I'm ready. And maybe, he looked at Bradley, maybe I'll apply through the front door this time instead of sneaking in. Laughter, warm and genuine, filled the hall.
"But I want to say something about Mr. Blackwell," Ethan said, and the room went silent again. Marcus Blackwell was awaiting trial for patent fraud. His company had been sold to competitors. His fortune, mostly built on lies, had been seized by federal authorities. He'd lost everything. "I don't hate him," Ethan said quietly. "I'm angry at what he did. I'm hurt by how he treated me. But I understand something now that I didn't before." He looked directly at the camera recording this moment. "People like Mr. Blackwell aren't afraid of people like me because we're not smart enough. They're afraid because we are. Because every kid who learns despite barriers, who succeeds despite obstacles, who solves impossible problems proves that their gatekeeping is unnecessary. Their wealth doesn't make them superior. Their credentials don't make them smarter. Their power is built on convincing people like me that we don't deserve to try." The audience was absolutely still. So to every kid watching this, who feels like they don't belong, who's poor or different, or told they're not good enough, I want you to know something. Ethan's voice cracked slightly. You are good enough. You always were. The world just hasn't caught up to you yet. Dr. Rodriguez stood again, this time walking to the stage. She pulled out a folder. "Ethan," she said, "I have something for you. Something I think you've earned." She opened the folder to reveal a certificate. "On behalf of the International Mathematics Union, I am honored to present you with the Kaufman Prize for Innovation in Quantum Mathematics. You're the youngest recipient in history, and this," she held up a medal, "belonged to Dr. Kaufman himself. His daughter wanted you to have it." Ethan stared at the medal, unable to speak. Dr. Rodriguez hung it around his neck, then did something that made the entire room lose composure. She knelt before him, just as she had 3 months ago. "The honor," she said softly, "is still mine." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Scientists who'd spent their lives studying mathematics applauding a 12-year-old who'd taught himself from books. Ethan stood there, overwhelmed, until Claire came up and wrapped him in her arms. Later, after the ceremony, Ethan found himself in MIT's library, the same library where he'd first discovered quantum mechanics 3 years ago. Dr. Bradley had given him a special pass. He was no longer a trespasser. He was welcome. Ethan ran his fingers along the spines of the books that had taught him everything. Shankar's Principles of Quantum Mechanics, Nielsen and Chuang's Quantum Computation, Dr. Kaufman's collected papers. These books had been his teachers when he had no others, his companions when he was alone, his proof that knowledge was free to anyone willing to work for it. "There you are," Claire said from the doorway. "I should have known. Just wanted to see it again," Ethan said. "The place where everything started." Claire joined him between the stacks. "You know what I'm proudest of? Not the money, not the award, not even solving the equation." "Oh, what then?" "That you never stopped believing you deserved to be here," Claire said. "Even when everyone told you that you didn't. Even when I was too tired to tell you enough that you did. You knew, and that knowing changed everything." Ethan leaned against his mother. "I was scared every day. Scared someone would catch me. Scared I was wasting your time studying things that would never matter. Scared I'd always be the janitor's son sneaking through back doors. And now, Ethan said, looking around the library that had once been forbidden and was now his by right. I know that back doors and front doors lead to the same knowledge. The only difference is who feels entitled to walk through them. They left MIT together as the sun set over Cambridge, mother and son, walking through the front entrance with heads held high. Somewhere across the city, in communities where kids studied by streetlight and dreamed of impossible things, 75 children were opening new textbooks at the Collins Foundation Centers, learning that brilliance wasn't a gift reserved for the wealthy. It was a fire that burned in anyone willing to feed it. And in a small apartment in Roxbury that would soon be replaced by something bigger but would always be remembered as home, Ethan's torn sneakers sat in the closet next to new ones, not thrown away, never thrown away, because those shoes had carried him to MIT when he wasn't supposed to be there. They'd walked him to a chalkboard when everyone said he couldn't solve it. They'd stood firm when a billionaire tried to steal his future, and they'd remind him, always, that worth isn't measured by what you wear, or where you're from, or who gives you permission to be brilliant. It's measured by what you do when everyone tells you that you can't, and then doing it anyway.